Lives of the Most Eminent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects by Giorgio Vasari.
Life of Tiziano da Cadore. Tiziano was born at Cadore, a little township situated on the Piave and 5 miles distance from the pass of the Alps, in the year 1480, from the family of the Vecellio, one of the most noble in that place. At the age of 10, having a fine spirit and a lively intelligence, he was sent to Venice to the house of an uncle, an honored citizen, who, perceiving the boy to be much inclined to painting, placed him with Gianbellini, an excellent painter very famous at that time, as has been related. Under his discipline, attending to design, he soon showed that he was endowed by nature with all the gifts of intellect and judgment that are necessary for the art of painting, and since at that time Gianbellini and the other painters of that country, from not being able to study ancient works, were much, nay, altogether, given to copying from the life whatever work they did, and that with a dry, crude, and labored manner, Tiziano also for a time learned that method. But having come to about the year 1507, Giorgio da Castelfranco, not altogether liking that mode of working, began to give to his pictures more softness and greater relief, with a beautiful manner. Nevertheless, he used to set himself before living and natural objects, and counterfeit them as well as he was able with colours, and paint them broadly, with tints crude or soft, according as the life demanded, without doing any drawing, holding it as certain that to paint with colours only, without the study of drawing on paper, was the true and best method of working, and the true design. For he did not perceive that for him who wishes to distribute his compositions and accommodate his inventions well, it is necessary that he should first put them down on paper in several different ways, in order to see how the whole goes together, for the reason that the idea is not able to see or imagine the inventions perfectly within herself, if she does not reveal and demonstrate her conception to the eyes of the body, that these may assist her to form a good judgment. Besides which, it is necessary to give much study to the nude, if you wish to comprehend it well, which you will never do, nor is it possible, without having recourse to paper, and to keep always before you, while you paint, persons naked or draped, is no small restraint, whereas, when you have formed your hand by drawing on paper, you then come little by little with greater ease to carry your conceptions into execution, designing and painting together. And so, gaining practice in art, you make both manner and judgment perfect, doing away with the labor and effort wherewith those pictures were executed of which we have spoken above, not to mention that by drawing on paper you come to fill the mind with beautiful concepts, and learn to counterfeit all the objects of nature by memory, without having to keep them always before you, or being obliged to conceal beneath the glamour of colouring the painful fruits of your ignorance of design, in the manner that was followed for many years by the Venetian painters, Giorgione, Palma, Porderone, and others, who never saw Rome or any other works of absolute perfection. Tiziano then, having seen the method and manner of Giorgione, abandoned the manner of Gianbellini, although he had been accustomed to it for a long time, and attached himself to that of Giorgione, coming in a short time to imitate his works so well that his pictures at times were mistaken for works by Giorgione, as will be related below. Then, having grown in age, practice, and judgment, Tiziano executed many works in fresco, which cannot be enumerated in order, being dispersed over various places. Let it suffice that they were such that the opinion was formed by many experienced judges that he would become, as he afterwards did, a most excellent painter. At the time when he first began to follow the manner of Giorgione, not being more than 18 years of age, he made the portrait of a gentleman of the Barberigo family, his friend, which was held to be very beautiful, the likeness of the flesh colouring being true and natural, and all the hairs so well distinguished one from another that they might have been counted, as also might have been the stitches in a doublet of silvered satin that he painted in that work. In short, it was held to be so well done, and with such diligence, that if Tiziano had not written his name on a dark ground, it would have been taken for the work of Giorgione. Meanwhile, Giorgione himself had executed the principal façade of the Fondaco de' Tedeschi, and by means of Barberigo there were allotted to Tiziano certain scenes on the same building above the Merceria. After which work he painted a large picture with figures of the size of life, which is now in the hall of Monsignore Andrea Loredano, who dwells near San Marcuola. In that picture is painted Our Lady going to Egypt, in the midst of a great forest and certain landscapes that are very well done, because Tiziano had given his attention for many months to such things, and had kept in his house for that purpose some Germans, who were excellent painters of landscapes and verdure. In the wood in that picture, likewise, he painted many animals, which he portrayed from the life, and they are truly natural and almost alive. Next, in the house of Monsignore Giovanni d'Anna, a Flemish gentleman and merchant, his gossip, he made his portrait, which has all the appearance of life, and also an Ecce Homo with many figures, which is held by Tiziano himself and by others to be a very beautiful work. The same master painted a picture of Our Lady with other figures, the size of life, of men and children, all portrayed from the life and from persons of that house. Then, in the year 1507, while the Emperor Maximilian was making war on the Venetians, Tiziano, according to his own account, painted an angel Raphael with Tobias and a dog in the church of San Marziliano, with a distant landscape, where, in a little wood, Saint John the Baptist is praying on his knees to heaven, whence comes a radiance that illumines him. And this work it is thought that he executed before he made a beginning with the façade of the Fondaco de' Tedeschi. Concerning which façade, many gentlemen, not knowing that Giorgione was not working there any more, and that Tiziano was doing it, who had uncovered one part, meeting with Giorgione, congratulated him in friendly fashion, saying that he was acquitting himself better in the façade towards the Merceria than he had done in that which is over the Grand Canal. At which circumstance Giorgione felt such disdain that until Tiziano had completely finished the work, and it had become well known that the same had done that part, he would scarcely let himself be seen, and from that time onward he would never allow Tiziano to associate with him or be his friend. In the year after, 1508, Tiziano published in wood engraving The Triumph of Faith, with an infinity of figures, our first parents, the patriarchs, the prophets, the Sibyls, the innocents, the martyrs, the apostles, and Jesus Christ, born in triumph by the 4 evangelists and the 4 doctors, with the holy confessors behind. In that work, Tiziano displayed boldness, a beautiful manner, and the power to work with facility of hand, and I remember that Fra Sebastiano del Piombo, conversing of this, said to me that if Tiziano had been in Rome at that time, and had seen the works of Michelagnolo, those of Raffaello, and the ancient statues, and had studied design, he would have done things absolutely stupendous, considering the beautiful mastery that he had in colouring, and that he deserved to be celebrated as the finest and greatest imitator of nature in the matter of colour in our times, and with the foundation of the grand method of design he might have equalled the Urbinate and Buonarroti. Afterwards, having gone to Vicenza, Tiziano painted the Judgment of Solomon in fresco, which was a beautiful work, under the little loggia where justice is administered in public audience. He then returned to Venice and painted the façade of the Grimani. At Padua, in the church of San Antonio, he executed likewise in fresco some stories of the actions of that saint, and for that of San Spirito he painted a little altar-piece with a Saint Mark seated in the midst of certain saints, in whose faces are some portraits from life done in oils with the greatest diligence, which picture may have believed to be by the hand of Giorgione. Then, a scene having been left unfinished in the hall of the Great Council through the death of Giovanni Bellini, wherein Frederick Barbarossa is kneeling at the door of the Church of San Marco before Pope Alexander IV, who places his foot on Barbarossa's neck, Tiziano finished it, changing many things, and making there many portraits from life of his friends and others, for which he was rewarded by receiving from the Senate an office in the Fondaco de' Tedeschi, called the Censeria, which yields 300 crowns a year. That office those signori are accustomed to give to the most excellent painter of their city, on the condition that he shall be obliged from time to time to paint the portrait of their prince or doge at his election, for the price of only 8 crowns, which the prince himself pays to him, which portrait is afterwards kept, in memory of him, in a public place in the palace of San Marco. In the year 1514, Duke Alfonso of Ferrara had caused a little chamber to be decorated, and had commissioned Dosso, the painter of Ferrara, to execute in certain compartments stories of Aeneas, Mars, and Venus, and in a grotto Vulcan with 2 smiths at the forge. And he desired that there should also be there pictures by the hand of Gian Bellini. Bellini painted on another wall a vat of red wine with some bacchanals around it, and satyrs, musicians, and other men and women, all drunk with wine, and near them a nude and very beautiful Silenus, riding on his ass, with figures about him that have the hands full of fruits and grapes, which work was in truth executed and coloured with great diligence, insomuch that it is one of the most beautiful pictures that Gian Bellini ever painted, although in the manner of the draperies there is a certain sharpness after the German manner, nothing indeed of any account, because he imitated a picture by the Fleming Albrecht Dürer, which had been brought in those days to Venice and placed in the church of San Bartolomeo, a rare work and full of most beautiful figures painted in oils. On that vat Gian Bellini wrote these words, Ioannes Bellinus Venetus, p. 1514. That work he was not able to finish completely, because he was old, and Tiziano, as the most excellent of all the others, was sent for to the end that he might finish it, wherefore, being desirous to acquire excellence and to make himself known, he executed with much diligence 2 scenes that were wanting in that little chamber. In the first is a river of red wine, about which are singers and musicians, both men and women, as it were, drunk, and a naked woman who is sleeping, so beautiful that she might be alive, together with other figures, and on this picture Tiziano wrote his name. In the other, which is next to it and seen first on entering, he painted many little boys and loves in various attitudes, which much pleased that lord, as also did the other picture, but most beautiful of all is one of those boys who is making water into a river and is reflected in the water, while the others are around a pedestal that has the form of an altar, upon which is a statue of Venus with a sea conch in the right hand, and grace and beauty about her, which are very lovely figures and executed with incredible diligence. On the door of a press, likewise, Tiziano painted an image of Christ from the waist upwards, marvellous, nay, stupendous, to whom a base Hebrew is showing the coin of Caesar, which image, and also other pictures in that little chamber, our best craftsmen declare to be the finest and best executed that Tiziano has ever done, and indeed they are most rare. Wherefore he well deserved to be most liberally recompensed and rewarded by that lord, whom he portrayed excellently well with one arm resting on a great piece of artillery, and he also made a portrait of Signora Laura, who afterwards became the wife of the Duke, which is a stupendous work. And, in truth, gifts have great potency with those who labour for the love of art, when they are uplifted by the liberality of princes. At that time, Tiziano formed a friendship with the divine Messer Lodovico Ariosto, and was recognized by him as a most excellent painter celebrated in his Orlando Furioso. E Tizian che onora non men cador, che Venezia e Urbino. Having then returned to Venice, Tiziano painted on a canvas in oils, for the father-in-law of Giovanni de Castelbolognese, a naked shepherd and a country girl who is offering him some pipes that he may play them, with a most beautiful landscape, which picture is now at Faenza in the house of the said Giovanni. He then executed for the high altar in the church of the Friars Minors, called the Ca Grande, a picture of Our Lady ascending into heaven, and below her the 12 apostles who are gazing upon her as she ascends. But of this work, from its having been painted on cloth and perhaps not well kept, there is little to be seen. For the chapel of the Pesari family in the same church, he painted in an altar-piece the Madonna with the Child in her arms, a Saint Peter and a Saint George, and about them the patrons of the work, kneeling and portrayed from life, among whom are the Bishop of Paphos and his brother, then newly returned from the victory which that bishop won against the Turks. For the little church of San Nicolo in the same convent, he painted in an altar-piece St. Nicholas, St. Francis, St. Catherine, and also a nude St. Sebastian, portrayed from life and without any artifice that can be seen to have been used to enhance the beauty of the limbs and trunk, there being nothing there but what he saw in the work of nature, insomuch that it all appears as if stamped from the life, so flesh-like it is and natural. But for all that it is held to be beautiful, as is also very lovely the Madonna with the Child in her arms, at whom all those figures are gazing. The subject of that picture was drawn on wood by Tiziano himself, and then engraved by others and printed. For the church of San Rocco, after the works described above, he painted a picture of Christ with the cross on his shoulder, and about his neck a cord that is drawn by a Hebrew, and that figure, which many have believed to be by the hand of Giorgio, is now the object of the greatest devotion in Venice, and has received in alms more crowns than Tiziano and Giorgio ever gained in all their lives. Then he was invited to Rome by Bembo, whom he had already portrayed, and who was at that time secretary to Pope Leo X, to the end that he might see Rome, Raffaello da Urbino, and others. But Tiziano delayed his visit so long from one day to another that Leo died, and the Raffaello in 1520, and after all he never went. For the church of San Maria Maggiore he painted a picture with Saint John the Baptist in the desert among some rocks, an angel that appears as if alive, and a little piece of distant landscape with some trees upon the bank of a river, all full of grace. He made portraits from life of the Prince Grimani and Loredano, which were held to be admirable, and not long afterwards of King Francis when he departed from Italy in order to return to France. And in the year when Andrea Gritti was elected Doge, Tiziano painted his portrait, which was a very rare thing, in a picture within Our Lady, St. Mark, and St. Andrew with the countenance of that Doge, which picture, a most marvellous work, is in the Sala del Collegio. He has also painted portraits, in addition to those of the Doges named above, being obliged, as has been related, to do it, of others who have been Doges in their time, Pietro Lando, Francesco Donato, Marcantonio Trevisano, and Veniero. But by the two Doges and brothers Paoli, he has been excused recently, because of his great age, from that obligation. Before the sack of Rome, there had gone to live in Venice Pietro Aretino, a most famous poet of our times, and he became very much the friend of Tiziano and Sansovino, which brought great honor and advantage to Tiziano, for the reason that the poet made him known wherever his pen reached, and especially to princes of importance, as will be told in the proper place. Meanwhile, to return to Tiziano's works, he painted the altarpiece for the altar of San Piero Martire in the church of San Giovanni e Polo, depicting therein that holy martyr larger than life, in a forest of very great trees, fallen to the ground and assailed by the fury of a soldier, who has wounded him so grievously in the head that as he lies but half alive there is seen in his face the horror of death, while in another friar who runs forward in flight may be perceived the fear and terror of death. In the air are two nude angels coming down from a flash of heaven's lightning, which gives light to the landscape, which is most beautiful, and to the whole work besides, which is the most finished, the most celebrated, the greatest, and the best conceived and executed that Tiziano has yet ever done in all his life. This work being seen by Gritti, who was always very much the friend of Tiziano, as also of Sansovino, he caused to be allotted to him a great scene of the rout of Chiaradatta in the hall of the Great Council. In it he painted a battle with soldiers in furious combat, while a terrible rain falls from heaven, which work, wholly taken from life, is held to be the best of all the scenes that are in that hall, and the most beautiful. And in the same palace, at the foot of a staircase, he painted a Madonna in fresco. Having made not long afterwards for a gentleman of the Contarini family a picture of a very beautiful Christ, who is seated at table with Cleophas and Luke, it appeared to that gentleman that the work was worthy to be in a public place, as in truth it is. Wherefore, having made a present of it, like a true lover of his country and of the Commonwealth, to the Signora, it was kept a long time in the apartments of the Doge, but at the present day it is in a public place, where it may be seen by everyone, in the Salotto d'Ora, in front of the hall of the Council of Ten, over the door. About the same time also he painted for the Scuola of San Maria della Charita Our Lady ascending the steps of the temple, with heads of every kind portrayed from nature, and for the Scuola of San Fantino, likewise, a little altarpiece of Saint Jerome in penitence, which was much extolled by the craftsmen, but was consumed by fire 2 years ago, together with the whole church. It is said that in the year 1530, the Emperor Charles V being in Bologna, Tiziano was invited to that city by Cardinal Ippolito de' Medici, through the agency of Pietro Aretino. There he made a most beautiful portrait of His Majesty in full armour, which so pleased him that he caused 1,000 crowns to be given to Tiziano, but of these he was obliged afterwards to give the half to the sculptor Alfonso Lombardi, who had made a model to be reproduced in marble, as was related in his Life. Having returned to Venice, Tiziano found that a number of gentlemen, who had taken Pordenone into their favour, praising much the works executed by him on the ceiling of the Sala dei Pregai and elsewhere, had caused a little altar-piece to be allotted to him in the church of San Giovanni Elemosinario, to the end that he might paint it in a competition with Tiziano, who for the same place had painted a short time before the said San Giovanni Elemosinario in the habit of a bishop. But for all the diligence that Pordenone devoted to that altar-piece, he was not able to equal, or even by a great measure to approach to the work of Tiziano. Next, Tiziano executed a most beautiful altar picture of an Annunciation for the church of Santa Maria degli Angeli at Murano, but he who had caused it to be painted, not being willing to spend 500 crowns upon it, which Tiziano was asking, by the advice of Messer Pietro Aretino, he sent it as a gift to the above-named Emperor Charles V, who, liking that work vastly, made him a present of 2,000 crowns, and where that picture was to have been placed, there was set in its stead one by the hand of Pordenone. Nor had any long time passed when Charles V, returning to Bologna for a conference with Pope Clement, at the time when he came with his army from Hungary, desired to be portrayed again by Tiziano. Before departing from Bologna, Tiziano also painted a portrait of the above-named Cardinal Ippolito de' Medici in Hungarian dress, and in a smaller picture the same man in full armour, both which portraits are now in the guardaroba of Duke Cosimo. At that same time he executed a portrait of Alfonso d'Avalos, Marchese del Vasto, and one of the above-named Pietro Aretino, who then contrived that he should become the friend and servant of Federigo Gonzaga, Duke of Mantua, with whom Tiziano went to his states and there painted a portrait of him, which is a living likeness, and then one of the cardinal, his brother. These finished, he painted, for the adornment of a room among those of Giulio Romano, 12 figures from the waist upwards of the 12 Caesars, very beautiful, beneath each of which the said Giulio afterwards painted a story from their lives. In Cadore, his native place, Tiziano has painted an altar picture wherein are Our Lady, San Tiziano the Bishop, and a portrait of himself, kneeling. In the year when Pope Paul III went to Bologna, and from there to Ferrara, Tiziano, having gone to the court, made a portrait of that pope, which was a very beautiful work, and from it another for Cardinal Sanfiore, and both these portraits, for which he was very well paid by the Pope, are in Rome, one in the guardaroba of Cardinal Farnese, and the other in the possession of the heirs of the above-named Cardinal Sanfiore, and from them have been taken many copies, which are dispersed throughout Italy. At this same time, also, he made a portrait of Francesco Maria, Duke of Urbino, which was a marvellous work, wherefore Monsignori Pietro Aretino on this account celebrated him in a sonnet that began «Se il chiaro a pelle con la man dell'arte rassembrò d'Alessandro il volto e il petto». There are in the guardaroba of the same Duke, by the hand of Tiziano, two most lovely heads of women, and a young recumbent Venus with flowers and certain light draperies about her, very beautiful and well finished, and, in addition, a figure of Saint Mary Magdalene with the hair all loose, which is a rare work. There, likewise, are the portraits of Charles V, King Francis as a young man, Duke Guidobaldo II, Pope Sixtus IV, Pope Julius II, Paul III, the old Cardinal of Lorraine, and Suleiman, Emperor of the Turks, which portraits, I say, are by the hand of Tiziano, and most beautiful. In the same guardaroba, besides many other things, is a portrait of Hannibal the Carthaginian, cut in intaglio in an antique cornelian, and also a very beautiful head in marble by the hand of Donato. In the year 1541, Tiziano painted for the friars of San Spirito in Venice the altarpiece of their high altar, figuring in it the descent of the Holy Spirit upon the apostles, with a God depicted as of fire and the Spirit as a dove, which altarpiece becoming spoiled in no time, after having many disputes with those friars he had to paint it again, and it is that which is over the altar at the present day. For the church of San Nazzaro in Brescia, he executed the altarpiece of the high altar in 5 pictures. In the central picture is Jesus Christ returning to life, with some soldiers around, and at the sides are San Nazzaro, San Sebastian, the angel Gabriel, and the Virgin receiving the Annunciation. In a picture for the wall at the entrance of the Duomo of Verona, he painted an Assumption of Our Lady into heaven, with the apostles on the ground, which is held to be the best of the modern works in that city. In the year 1541 he made the portrait of Don Diego di Mendoza, at that time ambassador of Charles V in Venice, a whole-length figure and standing, which was very beautiful. And from this Tiziano began what has since come into fashion, the making of certain portraits of full length. In the same manner he painted that of the Cardinal of Trento, then a young man, and for Francesco Marcolini the portrait of Messer Pietro Aretino, but this last was by no means as beautiful as one of that poet, likewise by the hand of Tiziano, which Aretino himself sent as a present to Duke Cosimo de' Medici, to whom he sent also the head of Signor Giovanni de' Medici, the father of the said Lord Duke. That head was copied from a cast taken from the face of that lord when he died at Mantua, which was in the possession of Aretino, and both these portraits are in the guardaroba of the same Lord Duke, among many of most noble pictures. The same year, Vasari having been 13 months in Venice to execute, as has been related, a ceiling for Messer Giovanni Cornaro, and some works for the company of the Calza, Sansovino, who was directing the fabric of San Spirito, had commissioned him to make designs for 3 large pictures in oils, which were to go into the ceiling, to the end that he might execute them in painting. But, Vasari having afterwards departed, those 3 pictures were allotted to Tiziano, who executed them most beautifully, from his having contrived with great art to make the figures foreshortened from below upwards. In one is Abraham sacrificing Isaac, in another David severing the neck of Goliath, and in the third Abel slain by his brother Cain. About the same time, Tiziano painted a portrait of himself in order to leave that memory of himself to his children. The year 1546 having come, he went at the invitation of Cardinal Farnese to Rome, where he found Vasari, who, having returned from Naples, was executing the hall of the Cancelleria for the above-named cardinal, whereupon, Tiziano having been recommended by that lord to Vasari, Giorgio kept him company lovingly in taking him about to see the sights of Rome. And then, after Tiziano had rested for some days, rooms were given to him in the Belvedere, to the end that he might set his hand to painting once more the portrait of Pope Paul of full length, with one of Farnese and one of Duke Ottavio, which he executed excellently well and much to the satisfaction of those lords. At their persuasion he painted, for presenting to the Pope, a picture of Christ from the waist upwards in the form of an Ecce Homo, which work, whether it was that the works of Michelangelo, Raffaello, Polidoro, and others had made him lose some force, or for some other reason, did not appear to the painters, although it was a good picture, to be of the same excellence as many others by his hand, and particularly his portraits. Michelangelo and Vasari, going one day to visit Tiziano in the Belvedere, saw in a picture that he had executed at that time a nude woman representing Danae, who had in her lap Jove transformed into a rain of gold, and they praised it much, as one does in the painter's presence. After they had left him, discoursing of Tiziano's method, Buonarroti commended it not a little, saying that his colouring and his manner much pleased him, but that it was a pity that in Venice men did not learn to draw well from the beginning, and that those painters did not pursue a better method in their studies. For, he said, if this man had been in any way assisted by art and design, as he is by nature, and above all in counterfeiting the life, no one could do more or work better, for he has a fine spirit and a very beautiful and lively manner. And in fact this is true, for the reason that he who has not drawn much, nor studied the choicest ancient and modern works, cannot work well from memory by himself, or improve the things that he copies from life, giving them grace and perfection, wherein art goes beyond the scope of nature, which generally produces some parts that are not beautiful. Tiziano, finally departing from Rome with many gifts received from those lords, and in particular a benefice of good value for his son Pomponio, set himself on the road to return to Venice, after Orazio, his other son, had made a portrait of Messer Battista Ceciliano, an excellent player of the bass viol, which was a very good work, and he himself had executed some other portraits for Duke Guidobaldo of Urbino. Arriving in Florence, and seeing the rare works of that city, he was amazed by them no less than he had been by those of Rome. And besides that, he visited Duke Cosimo, who was at Poggio a Caiano, offering to paint his portrait, to which his Excellency did not give much heed, perchance in order not to do a wrong to the many noble craftsmen of his city and dominion. Then, having arrived in Venice, Tiziano finished for the Marchese del Vasto an allocution, for so they called it, made by that lord to his soldiers, and after that he took the portrait of Charles V, that of the Catholic king, and many others. These works finished, he painted a little altar-piece of the Annunciation for the church of Santa Maria Nuova in Venice, and then, employing the assistance of his young men, he executed a Last Supper in the refectory of Santos Giovanni e Polo, and for the high altar of the church of San Salvadore, an altar-piece in which is a Christ transfigured on Mount Tabor, and for another altar in the same church, a Madonna receiving the Annunciation from the angel. But these last works, although there is something of the good to be seen in them, are not much esteemed by him, and have not the perfection that his other pictures have. and since the works of Tiziano are without number, and particularly the portraits, it is almost impossible to make mention of them all. Wherefore I shall speak only of the most remarkable, but without order of time, it being of little import to know which was first and which later. Several times, as has been related, he painted the portrait of Charles V, and in the end he was summoned for that purpose to the court, where he portrayed him as he was in those his later years. And the work of Tiziano so pleased that all-conquering emperor, that after he had once seen it, he would not be portrayed by other painters. Each time that he painted him, he received 1,000 crowns of gold as a present, and he was made by His Majesty a chevalier, with the revenue of 200 crowns on the Chamber of Naples. In like manner, when he portrayed Philip, King of Spain, the son of Charles, he received from him a fixed allowance of 200 crowns more, insomuch that, adding those 400 to the 300 that he has on the Fondacco de' Tedeschi from the Signori of Venice, he has without exerting himself a fixed income of 700 crowns every year. Of the same Charles V and King Philip, Tiziano sent portraits to the Lord Duke Cosimo, who has them in his guardaroba. He portrayed Ferdinand, King of the Romans, who afterwards became emperor, and both his sons, Maximilian, now emperor, and his brother. He also portrayed Queen Maria, and, for the Emperor Charles V, the Duke of Saxony when he was a prisoner. But what a waste of time is this! There has been scarce a single lord of great name, or prince, or great lady, who has not been portrayed by Tiziano, a painter of truly extraordinary excellence in this field of art. He painted portraits of King Francis I of France, as has been related, Francesco Sforza, Duke of Milan, the Marquis of Pescara, Antonio d'Aleva, Massimiano Stampa, Signor Giovan Battista Castaldo, and other lords without number. In like manner, besides the works mentioned above, at various times he has executed many others. In Venice, by order of Charles V, he painted in a great altar-piece the Triune God enthroned, Our Lady and the Infant Christ with the dove over him, and the ground all of fire, signifying love, and the Father is surrounded by fiery cherubim. On one side is the same Charles V, and on the other the Empress, both clothed in linen garments, with the hands clasped in the attitude of prayer, among many saints, all which was after the command of the emperor, who, at that time at the height of his victories, began to show that he was minded to retire from the things of this world, as he afterwards did, in order to die like a true Christian, fearing God and desirous of his own salvation. Which picture the emperor said to Tiziano that he wished to place in the monastery wherein afterwards he finished the course of his life, and since it is a very rare work, it is expected that it may soon be published in engravings. The same Tiziano executed for Queen Maria a Prometheus, who is bound to Mount Caucasus and torn by Jove's eagle, a Sisyphus in hell who is toiling under his stone, and Tityus devoured by the vulture. These Her Majesty received, excepting the Prometheus, and with them a Tantalus of the same size, namely that of life, on canvas and in oils. He executed also a Venus and Adonis that are marvellous, she having swooned, and the boy in the act of rising to leave her, with some dogs about him that are very natural. On a panel of the same size, he represented Andromeda bound to the rock, and Perseus delivering her from the sea monster, then with picture none could be more lovely, as is also another of Diana, who, bathing in a fount with her nymphs, transforms Actaeon into a stag. He also painted Europa passing over the sea on the back of the bull. All these pictures are in the possession of the Catholic king, held very dear for the vivacity that Tiziano has given to the figures with his colours, making them natural and as if alive. It is true, however, that the method of work which he employed in these last pictures is no little different from the method of his youth, for the reason that the early works are executed with a certain delicacy and a diligence that are incredible, and they can be seen both from near and from a distance. And these last works are executed with bold strokes and dashed off with a broad and even coarse sweep of the brush, insomuch that from near little can be seen, but from a distance they appear perfect. This method has been the reason that many, wishing to imitate him therein and to play the practiced master, have painted clumsy pictures. And this happens because, although many believe that they are done without effort, in truth it is not so, and they deceive themselves, for it is known that they are painted over and over again, and that he returned to them with his colours so many times that the labour may be perceived. And this method, so used, is judicious, beautiful, and astonishing, because it makes pictures appear alive and painted with great art, but conceals the labour. Tiziano painted recently in a picture 3 braccia high and 4 braccia broad, Jesus Christ as an infant in the lap of Our Lady and adored by the Magi, with a good number of figures of 1 braccio each, which is a very lovely work, as is also another picture that he himself copied from that one and gave to the old Cardinal of Ferrara. Another picture, in which he depicted Christ mocked by the Jews, which is most beautiful, was placed in a chapel of the Church of Santa Maria delle Grazie in Milan. For the Queen of Portugal, he painted a picture of a Christ scourged by Jews at the column, a little less than the size of life, which is very beautiful. For the high altar of San Domenico at Ancona, he painted an altar-piece with Christ on the cross, and at the foot Our Lady, Saint John, and Saint Dominic, all most beautiful, and executed in his later manner with broad strokes, as has just been described above. And by the same hand, in the Church of the Crocicieri at Venice, is the picture that is on the altar of San Lorenzo, wherein is the martyrdom of that saint, with a building full of figures, and Saint Lawrence lying half upon the gridiron in foreshortening, with a great fire beneath him, and about it some who are kindling it. And since he counterfeited an effect of night, there are 2 servants with torches in their hands, which throw light where the glare of the fire below the gridiron does not reach, which is piled high and very fierce. Besides this, he depicted a lightning flash, which, darting from heaven and cleaving the clouds, overcomes the light of the fire and that of the torches, shining over the saint and the other principal figures, and, in addition to those 3 lights, the figures that he painted in the distance at the windows of the building have the light of lamps and candles that are near them, and all, in short, is executed with beautiful art, judgment, and genius. In the church of San Sebastiano, on the altar of San Niccolò, there is by the hand of the same Tiziano a little altarpiece of a Saint Nicholas who appears as if alive, seated in a chair painted in the likeness of stone, with an angel that is holding his mitre, which work he executed at the commission of Messer Niccolo Crasso, the advocate. Tiziano afterwards painted, for sending to the Catholic king, a figure of Saint Mary Magdalene from the middle of the thighs upwards, all dishevelled, that is, with the hair falling over the shoulders, about the throat, and over the breast, the while that, raising the head with the eyes fixed on heaven, she reveals remorse in the redness of the eyes, and in her tears repentance for her sins. Wherefore the picture moves mightily all who behold it, and, what is more, although she is very beautiful, it moves not to lust, but to compassion. This picture, when it was finished, so pleased Silvio, a Venetian gentleman, that in order to have it, being one who takes supreme delight in painting, he gave Tiziano 100 crowns, wherefore Tiziano was forced to paint another, which was no less beautiful, for sending to the above-named Catholic king. There are also to be seen portraits from life by Tiziano of a Venetian citizen called Sinistri, who was much his friend, and of another named Messer Paolo da Ponte, for whom he likewise portrayed a daughter that he had at that time, a most beautiful young woman called Signora Giulia da Ponte, a dear friend of Tiziano, and in like manner Signora Irene, a very lovely maiden, skilled in letters and music, and a student of design, who, dying about 7 years ago, was celebrated by the pens of almost all the writers of Italy. He portrayed Messer Francesco Filetto, an orator of happy memory, and in the same picture, before him, his son, who seems as if alive, which portrait is in the house of Messer Matteo Giustiniani, a lover of these arts, who has also had a picture painted for himself by the painter Jacopo da Bassano, which is very beautiful, as are also many other works by that Bassano, which are dispersed throughout Venice and held in great price, particularly his little works and animals of every kind. Tiziano portrayed Bembo another time, namely after he became a cardinal, Fracastoro and Cardinal Accolti of Ravenna, which last portrait Duke Cosimo has in his guardaroba, and our Danese, the sculptor, has in his house at Venice a portrait by the hand of Tiziano of a gentleman of the Delfini family. There may be seen portraits by the same hand of Messer Niccolo Zono of Rossa, wife of the Grand Turk, at the age of 16, and of Cameria, her daughter, with most beautiful dresses and adornments. In the house of Messer Francesco Sonica, an advocate and a gossip of Tiziano, is a portrait by his hand of that Messer Francesco, and in a large picture Our Lady flying to Egypt, who is seen to have dismounted from the ass and to have seated herself upon a stone on the road, with Saint Joseph beside her, and a little Saint John who is offering to the infant Christ some flowers picked by the hand of an angel from the branches of a tree that is in the middle of a wood full of animals, where in the distance the ass stands grazing. That picture, which is full of grace, the said gentleman has placed at the present day in a palace that he has built for himself at Padua, near San Giustina. In the house of a gentleman of the Pisani family, near San Marco, there is by the hand of Tiziano the portrait of a gentlewoman, which is a marvellous thing. And having made for Monsignor Giovanni della Casa, the Florentine, who has been illustrious in our times both for nobility of blood and as a man of letters, a very beautiful portrait of a gentlewoman whom that lord loved while he was in Venice, Tiziano was rewarded by being honoured by him with the lovely sonnet that begins Ben veggio, Tiziano, in forme nuove, l'idolo mio, che I begli occhi apre e gira, with what follows. Finally, this excellent painter sent to the above-named Catholic king a Last Supper of Christ with the Apostles, in a picture 7 braccia long, which was a work of extraordinary beauty. In addition to the works described, and many others of less merit executed by this man, which are omitted for the sake of brevity, he has in his house sketched in and begun the following: the martyrdom of Saint Lawrence, similar to that described above, and destined by him for sending to the Catholic king, a great canvas wherein is Christ on the cross, with the thieves, and at the foot the ministers of the crucifixion, which he is painting for Messer Giovanni d'Anna, and a picture which was begun for the Doge Grimani, father of the Patriarch of Aquileia. And for the whole of the great palace of Brescia, he has made a beginning with 3 large pictures that are to go in the ornamentation of the ceiling, as has been related in speaking of Cristofano and his brother, painters of Brescia. He also began, many years ago, for Alfonso I, Duke of Ferrara, a picture of a nude young woman bowing before Minerva, with another figure at the side, and a sea, in the centre of which, in the distance, is Neptune in his car. But through the death of that lord, after whose fancy the work was being executed, it was not finished and remained with Tiziano. He has also carried well forward, but not finished, a picture wherein is Christ appearing to Mary Magdalene in the garden in the form of a gardener, with figures the size of life. Another, also of equal size, in which the Madonna and the other Marys being present, the dead Christ is laid in the sepulchre. Likewise a picture of Our Lady, which is one of the best things that are in that house, and, as has been told, a portrait of himself, that was finished by him 4 years ago, very beautiful and natural, and finally a Saint Paul who is reading, a half-length figure which has all the appearances of the real saint filled with the Holy Spirit. All these works, I say, he has executed, with many others that I omit in order not to be wearisome, up to his present age of about 76 years. Tiziano has been very sound in health, and as fortunate as any man of his kind has ever been, and he has not received from heaven anything save favours and blessings. In his house at Venice have been all the princes, men of letters, and persons of distinction who have gone to that city or lived there in his time, because, in addition to his excellence in art, he has shown great gentleness, beautiful breeding, and most courteous ways and manners. He has had in Venice some competitors, but not of much worth, so that he has surpassed them easily with the excellence of his art, and with his power of attaching himself and making himself dear to the man of quality. He has earned much, for he has been very well paid for his works, but it would have been well for him in these his last years not to work save as a pastime, so as not to diminish with works of less excellence the reputation gained in his best years, when his natural powers were not declining and drawing towards imperfection. When Vasari, the writer of this history, was at Venice in the year 1566, he went to visit Tiziano, as one who was much his friend, and found him at his painting with brushes in his hand, although he was very old, and he had much pleasure in seeing him and discoursing with him. He made known to Vasari Messer Gianmaria Verdezotti, a young Venetian gentleman full of talent, a friend of Tiziano, and passing able in drawing and painting, as he showed in some landscapes of great beauty drawn by him. This man has by the hand of Tiziano, whom he loves and cherishes as a father, 2 figures painted in oils within 2 niches, an Apollo and a Diana. Tiziano, then, having adorned with excellent pictures the city of Venice, nay, all Italy and other parts of the world, deserves to be loved and revered by the craftsmen, and in many things to be admired and imitated, as one who has executed, and is still executing, works worthy of infinite praise, which shall endure as long as the memory of illustrious men may live. Now, although many have been with Tiziano in order to learn, yet the number of those who can truly be called his disciples is not great, for the reason that he has not taught much, and each pupil has gained more or less knowledge according as he has been able to acquire it from the works executed by Tiziano. There has been with him, among others, one Giovanni, a Fleming, who has been a much extolled master in figures, both small and large, and in portraits marvellous, as may be seen in Naples, where he lived some time, and finally died. By his hand, and this must do him honour for all time, were the designs of the anatomical studies that the most excellent Andrea Vecellio caused to be engraved and published with his work. But he who has imitated Tiziano more than any other is Peris Bordone, who, born in Treviso from a father of Treviso and a Venetian mother, was taken at the age of 8 to the house of some relatives in Venice. There, having learned his grammar and become an excellent musician, he went to be with Tiziano, but he did not spend many years with him, for he perceived that man to be not very ready to teach his young men, although besought by them most earnestly and invited by their patients to do his duty by them, and he resolved to leave them. He was much grieved that Giorgio should have died in those days, whose manner pleased him vastly, and even more his reputation for having taught well and willingly, and with lovingness, all that he knew. But, since there was nothing else to be done, Paris resolved in his mind that he would follow the manner of Giorgio. And so, setting himself to labour and to counterfeit the work of that master, he became such that he acquired very good credit, wherefore at the age of 18 there was allotted to him an altar-piece that was to be painted for the church of San Niccolò of the Friars Minors. Which having heard, Tiziano so went to work with various means and favours that he took it out of his hands, either to prevent him from being able to display his ability so soon, or perhaps drawn by his desire of gain. Afterwards, Paris was summoned to Vicenza to paint a scene in fresco in the loggia of the piazza where justice is administered, beside that of the Judgment of Solomon which Tiziano had previously executed, and he went very willingly and painted there a story of Noah with his sons, which was held to be a work passing good in diligence and in design, and not less beautiful than that of Tiziano, insomuch that by those who know not the truth, they are considered to be both by the same hand. Having returned to Venice, Paris executed some nudes in fresco at the foot of the bridge of the Rialto, by reason of which essay he was commissioned to paint some facades of houses in Venice. Being then summoned to Treviso, he painted there likewise some facades and other works, and in particular many portraits, which gave much satisfaction, that of the magnificent Messer Alberto Unigo, that of Messer Marco Serravalle, and of Messer Francesco da Quer, of the Canon Rovere, and of Monsignor Alberti. For the Duomo of that city, in an altarpiece in the centre of the church, at the instance of the revered vicar, he painted the Nativity of Jesus Christ, and then a resurrection. For San Francesco he executed another altarpiece at the request of the Chevalier Rovere, another for San Girolamo, and one for Ognissanti, with different heads of saints, both male and female, all beautiful and varied in the attitudes and in the vestments. He executed another altarpiece for San Lorenzo, and in San Polo he painted 3 chapels, in the largest of which he depicted Christ rising from the dead, the size of life, and accompanied by a great multitude of angels. In the second, some saints with many angels about them, and in the third, Jesus Christ upon a cloud, with Our Lady, who is presenting to him Saint Dominic. All these works have made him known as an able man and a lover of his city. In Venice, where he has dwelt almost always, he has executed many works at various times. But the most beautiful, the most remarkable, and the most worthy of praise that Paris ever painted was a scene in the Scuola of San Marco, at Santas Giovanni e Polla, wherein is the story of the fishermen presenting to the Signora of Venice the ring of St. Mark, with a very beautiful building in perspective, about which is seated the Senate with the Doge, among which senators are many portraits from nature, lifelike and well painted beyond belief. The beauty of this work, executed so well and coloured in fresco, was the reason that he began to be employed by many gentlemen. Thus, in the great house of the Foscari, near San Barnaba, he executed many paintings and pictures, and among them a Christ, who, having descended to the limbo of hell, is delivering the Holy Fathers, which is held to be a work out of the ordinary. For the church of San Giobbe in Canal Reo, he painted a most beautiful altar-piece, and for San Giovanni in Bragola another, and the same for San Maria della Celeste and for San Marina. But, knowing that he who wishes to be employed in Venice is obliged to endure too much servitude in paying court to one man or another, Paris resolved, as a man of quiet nature and far removed from certain methods of procedure, whenever an occasion might present itself, to go abroad to execute such works as fortune might set before him, without having to go about begging. Wherefore, having made his way with a good opportunity into France in the year 1538 to serve King Francis, he executed for him many portraits of ladies and other pictures with various paintings, and at the same time he painted for Monseigneur de Guise a most beautiful church picture, and the chamber picture of Venus and Cupid. For the Cardinal of Lorraine he painted a Christ in an Ecce Homo, a Jove with Io, and many other works. He sent to the King of Poland a picture wherein was Jove with a nymph, which was held to be a very beautiful thing. And to Flanders he sent 2 other most beautiful pictures, a Saint Mary Magdalene in the desert accompanied by some angels, and a Diana who is bathing with her nymphs in a fount, which 2 pictures the Milanese Candiano caused him to paint, the physician of Queen Maria, as presents for her Highness. At Augsburg, in the palace of the Fugger family, he executed many works of the greatest importance, to the value of 3,000 crowns. And in the same city he painted for the Prineri, great men in that place, a large picture wherein he counterfeited in perspective all the 5 orders of architecture, which was a very beautiful work, and another chamber picture, which is in the possession of the Cardinal of Augsburg. At Crema he has executed 2 altarpieces for San Agostino, in one of which is portrait Signor Giulio Manfrone, representing a Saint George in full armor. The same master has painted many works at Civitale di Belluno, which are extolled, and in particular an altarpiece in San Maria and another in San Joseph, which are very beautiful. He sent to Signor Ottaviano Grimaldo a portrait of him, the size of life and most beautiful, and with it another picture, equal in size, of a very lustful woman. Having then gone to Milan, Paris painted for the church of San Celso an altarpiece with some figures in the air, and beneath them a very beautiful landscape, at the instance, so it is said, of Signor Carlo da Roma. And for the palace of the same lord 2 large pictures in oils, in one Venus and Mars under Vulcan's net, and in the other King David seeing Bathsheba being bathed by her serving women in the fount, and also the portrait of that lord and that of Signora Paola Visconti, his consort, and some pieces of landscape not very large, but most beautiful. At this same time he painted many of Ovid's fables for the Marchese d'Astorga, who took them with him to Spain, and for Signor Tommaso Marini, likewise, he painted many things of which there is no need to make mention. And this much it must suffice to have said of Paris, who, being 75 years of age, lives quietly at home with his comforts, and works for pleasure at the request of certain princes and others his friends, avoiding rivalries and certain vain ambitions, lest he should suffer some hurt, and have his supreme tranquillity and peace disturbed by those who walk not, as he says, in truth, but by dubious ways, malignantly and without charity, whereas he is accustomed to live simply and by a certain natural goodness, and knows nothing of subtleties or astuteness in his life. He has executed recently a most beautiful picture for the Duchess of Savoy, of a Venus and Cupid that are sleeping, guarded by a servant, all executed so well that it is not possible to praise them enough. But here I must not omit to say that a kind of painting which is almost discontinued in every other place, namely mosaic, is kept alive by the most serene Senate of Venice. Of this the benign, and as it were the principal reason, has been Tiziano, who, so far as it has lain in him, has always taken pains that it should be practised in Venice, and has caused honourable salaries to be given to those who have worked at it. Wherefore various works have been executed in the church of San Marco, all the old works have been almost renewed, and this sort of painting has been carried to such a height of excellence as is possible, and to a different condition from that in which it was in Florence and Rome at the time of Giotto, Alesso Baldovinetti, the Ghirlandajo family, and the miniaturist Gherardo. And all that has been done in Venice has come from the design of Tiziano and other excellent painters, who have made drawings and coloured cartoons to the end that the works might be carried to such perfection as may be seen in those of the portico of San Marco, where in a very beautiful niche there is a judgment of Solomon so lovely that in truth it would not be possible to do more with colours. In the same place is the genealogical tree of Our Lady by the hand of Lodovico Rosso, all full of sibyls and prophets executed in a delicate manner and put together very well, with a relief that is passing good. But none have worked better in this art in our times than Valerio and Vincenzio Zuccheri of Treviso, by whose hands are stories many and various that may be seen in San Marco, and in particular that of the Apocalypse, wherein around the throne of God are the 4 evangelists in the form of animals, the 7 candlesticks, and many other things executed so well that, looking at them from below, they appear as if done in oil colours with the brush. Besides that, there may be seen in their hands and about them little pictures full of figures executed with the greatest diligence, insomuch that they have the appearance not of paintings only, but of miniatures, and yet they are made of stones joined together. There are also many portraits: the Emperor Charles V, Ferdinand his brother, who succeeded him in the empire, and Maximilian, son of Ferdinand and now emperor, likewise the head of the most illustrious Cardinal Bembo, the glory of our age, and that of the Magnificent, all executed with such diligence and unity, and so well harmonized in the lights, flesh colors, tints, shadows, and every other thing, that there is nothing better to be seen, nor any more beautiful work in a similar material. And it is in truth a great pity that this most excellent art of working in mosaic, with its beauty and everlasting life, is not more in use than it is, and that, by the fault of the princes who have the power, no attention is given to it. In addition to those named above, there has worked in mosaic at San Marco, in competition with the Zuccheri, one Bartolomeo Bozzato, who also has acquitted himself in his works in such a manner as to deserve undying praise. But that which has been of the greatest assistance to all in this art is the presence and advice of Tiziano, of whom, besides the men already named and many more, another disciple, helping him in many works, has been one Girolamo, whom I know by no other name than Girolamo di Tiziano.